Andor was a pleasant surprise. After the huge disappointment that was the Book of Boba Fett, and the enjoyable but mixed bag that was Obi-Wan Kenobi, I was fully expecting another mediocre outing under the Disney banner. They hit things off strong with The Mandalorian, but there was every indication that Disney would be incapable of elevating Star Wars above what past greatness it had already achieved. And then along came Andor. I was expecting something of quality, as all of Disney's Star Wars productions have been. But what I was not expecting was a dystopian narrative about the oppression of an authoritarian society told through the Star Wars universe. The explicit elements of the Empire's operations were always placed on the back burner, in favor of a spiritual, good versus evil morality play. But Andor has foregrounded this subject matter in its narrative, more than ever making the Star Wars universe into a real place lived in by real people suffering under the Imperial yoke. While Revenge of the Sith was once regarded as the darkest exploration of the Star Wars universe, we now have a story that can truly claim that title, exploring the impacts of authoritarian regimes across every aspect of society, illustrating the decay of democracy when it becomes democracy in name only.
Have come with open minds. Those of you who still believe that when we enter this building, we are in a temple.
No longer is Star Wars a vaguely dystopian sci-fi universe where a group of good rebels fight an evil empire, but an explicit dystopia exploring the corrupting effects of authoritarianism through civilian, political, law enforcement, and punitive systems, and a distinct examination of when revolution becomes a necessity, as well as the kinds of characters that are drawn to such ideas in the first place.
He's writing a manifesto. Did he tell you?
The pace of repression outstrips our ability to understand it, and that is the real trick of the Imperial thought machine.
In the first few episodes, this is written in the form of the by this point overused trope of conflict between indigenous populations and a hyper-developed military force. I'll never inherently argue with the educational value of including these perspectives in any narrative, but it is also an easy trope for writers to reach to for convenient moral messaging without any effort, leaving many end results feeling like a new incarnation of Hollywood's old crude caricatures of indigenous populations. But after the first 3 episodes, the tone pivots, and the Star Wars universe we'd seen up to this point suddenly starts looking much more Orwellian.
This used to be a 6-month sentence. 6 years.
6 years? No,
Change
no,
the
wait!
guidelines.
Take him away.
I didn't do anything! Hey!
Take it up with the Emperor.
Going so far as to nearly emulate the visual style of George Lucas's earlier film,
On program.
THX 1138,
Step onto the lift and stop.
which is definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it.
Move.
It's borderline surreal,
Step in there and stop.
but the Star Wars DNA shines through in his directorial focus on providing a unique audiovisual experience above all else.
Alright, then just back off, THX 1138. Back off for a second. Say about 20 guns. Some on the surface, some on the towers.
Now, there is one critical problem with Andor which has never shown itself in any Star Wars property before, even in any of Disney's previous outings. In fact, when The Force Awakens kicked off this new era of corporate-driven Star Wars, Lucas himself, a notorious world builder, had this to say.
They wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different. I make them completely different with, different planets, with different spaceships.
Star Wars' entertainment value has always been, in part, in its use of exoticism. The exoticism of the boundless diversity of an entire galaxy of wonders. The exoticism of a Western audience greeting elements of Eastern cultures. And finally, the exoticism of a universal mythology, blending motifs from across the world into something simultaneously alien and familiar. Some aspects of this remain in the Star Wars mantle that Disney has tried to uphold, but they pale in comparison with the unique perspective George Lucas let us view his world through. He built on Joseph Campbell's ideas to create a new myth for modern audiences that spoke to universally human motifs, yet one that was shown through a distinctly outsider perspective which only film could fully capture and convey to us. Across the entire first season of Andor, not including costumes and animatronics reused from previous movies or shows, there are a total of only 5 new alien designs. From a show of 12 episodes, we had 1 new alien appear at the end of the first episode, 1 at the end of the 6th, the end of the 7th, and then a particularly memorable one in episode 11, because I couldn't understand a word he was saying, even though he was speaking English. That's it. And no, I don't count lazy designs like sticking extra horns on sheep, or changing the color of some pelicans. Star Wars has always had mundane, known creatures scattered in amongst their more fantastic ones. But, just as an example, when The Empire Strikes Back did something similar, it was for a symbolic purpose in the mythological framework of Star Wars. Not to ease the burden on unimaginative creatives. Now, obviously, stuff like this is also done for budgeting reasons. A show like Andor consists of around 473 minutes of footage. That's 265 more minutes of footage than even the longest Star Wars movie. And it's cheaper to put a human actor on screen than it is to create an entire being from scratch, no matter what avenue you take to portray it, practical or digital. Either one costs money, and a modest costume will nearly always be cheaper. So, every time you're seeing a bland shot of people in a generic sci-fi background, you can thank a television budget spread across 12 episodes for this. But this general ethos of cheap world design can unfortunately be seen throughout the whole series. And for me, it was distracting. An Imperial security agent is suspended from his job and goes back home while he gets back on his feet. And sitting in his mother's dining room in this galaxy far, far away, what does he do? He eats Cocoa Puffs and watches the news. What does a character in the Star Wars universe wear when the weather gets a little chilly? Her Patagonia jacket, of course. What does an Imperial officer do when he's about to witness a rare natural phenomenon? He sets up his handycam to record it. This was a failure of world building. Something I'm going to be talking about a lot more on this channel, because it's a real passion of mine. I will say, the ships look as great as ever. The cinematography is top-notch. Coruscant looks as great as it ever has. And the characters are some of the most iconic characters introduced to the Disney canon since they bought the mantle. I mean, Mon Mothma was always a character I kind of liked, even with her brief previous appearances. But now that she's been elevated to House of Cards levels of political maneuvering, she may be my favorite character in the Star Wars universe. And Stellan Skarsgård gave an incredible performance as Luthen Rael, the first non-Force sensitive to openly demonstrate dark side ideals, and a key player in the birth of the rebellion. But seriously, how weird did it feel to go to so many different locations in the Star Wars galaxy and just see room after room filled with nothing but humans? If this is the only thing that changes as the show moves into subsequent seasons, I'll consider the whole experience perfected. But what did you think? Is this really a return to form in utilizing Star Wars for social commentary? Or is it just more corporate Disney? What takes on the show did I miss? With a 500-minute runtime, this is the longest we've ever spent in the Star Wars universe in one sitting, and there's bound to be many different things that viewers tune into. Let me know in the comments below. And if you're new to Off-Screen, welcome. I've got some big content in the works for 2023, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss any of my new videos. And if you like what you see after checking out Off-Screen's channel page, you can support the creation of this work by going to our Patreon. That's all for now. For returning subscribers, thanks for your patience with me as I work on the next big World Showcase installment. It's without a doubt my most ambitious video essay to date. I promise you it'll be worth the wait. Until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
I'm much more of the 1984 kind of guy.
Sure.
Than I am
THX 1138.
With the spaceship guy.
Yeah. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. You look at the situation now, where America is so proud of being the biggest economy, the most powerful military force on the planet. It's become the empire from the perspective of a lot of people around the world.
It was the empire during the Vietnam War. And what we never learned, from England or Rome or, a dozen other empires that went on for hundreds of years or sometimes thousands of years, we never got it. We never said, well, wait, this isn't the right thing to do. And we're still struggling with it.
You have a great line, which is, so this is how liberty dies.
We're in the middle of it right now.
To thunderous applause.
That's a theme that runs all the way through Star Wars.